What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Julio GTV. Today, we got another episode of The Decree. That's the show where I bring you the latest from a local, national, or global standpoint with a focus on the legal aspects and the overall goal of uncovering the truth. And today, what I have in store for you all is based upon some requests I've been getting, not only in my private practice as an attorney, but also in the real estate community in general. And that's the National Association of Realtors settlement. And so I'll give you guys a bird's eye view, a brief overview of the settlement, how it came about, what changes are coming, and what I think you guys should do to try and navigate that. And so let's just go ahead and jump right in here. And so again, we're talking about the National Association of Realtors, or what I'll refer to as NAR, and the settlement that came about as a result of several lawsuits. And so NAR was sued based upon violations of U.S. antitrust law. Now you might ask, okay, what is U.S. antitrust law? Well, these laws prohibit what they call anti-competitive conduct that deprive individuals or groups such as workers, consumers, taxpayers of the benefits of competition. And so you might say, well, what was anti-competitive about NAR that violated, U.S. antitrust law? Well, the claims were made based upon some of the rules it had in play for its commission structure, particularly the buyer-broker commission structure. And so to really understand what the claims were, we need to understand what the rule said, what the structure said, and what are some of the effects of that would constitute anti-competitive conduct. And so if you're a broker or realtor, you know that the seller is required under these rules to set commission for the buyer, broker, or realtor in order to submit a NAR affiliated MLS listing. So in other words, if you wanted to list a property, you would have to put how much the buyer's broker would receive in commission or compensation. And then, of course, the seller would pay that commission or compensation. So that's the commission structure that we have at hand here generally. And the arguments now are that it's anti-competitive conduct because the buyer does not get to decide how much their agent gets paid. And they also went as far as saying that the seller's agents and buyer's agents are conspiring or fixing these commissions, which are usually around somewhere 3%, and that would constitute anti-competitive conduct. I wouldn't go as far as, using those terms, just given because I understand how these transactions occur, but I could see the argument of how the structure is set that would prevent the buyer particularly from negotiating, or in other words, the commission being set. And so again, the sub-argument to that would be that commission is fixed and the buyer's agent doesn't have to negotiate with the buyer for the commission or prove, that they've earned their commission, the value earned. And that situation would be anti-competitive, therefore giving claim to that violation of U.S. antitrust law. So that's the argument in general. I do think that, the argument isn't getting at or telling brokers or realtors that they're not worth this 3% commission. I think it's just saying that with this set structure, it's constituting anti-competitive conduct, which the court did find. And in that initial lawsuit, they awarded a couple $1 billion, I believe it was, and then a couple more lawsuits came about and tacked on a couple more $1 billion. And NAR initially committed to fighting it to get it overturned. They didn't believe it was right in terms of the judgments that were had by the court. And they, agreed to fight tooth and nail, so to speak. However, you now know that we have the settlement, so they eventually waved the white flag, threw in the towel, and said, you know what, let's just get this settled and move on. And so in the settlement, they agreed to pay $418 million instead of billions of dollars. And then you're getting a set of changes or rules that must be implemented or not implemented in order to eliminate this anti-competitive conduct. And so you'll find those rules in the settlement agreement, which I will have a link down below so you could, review, download, whatever you want to do. It is a 108-page document. Again, I'm not covering the whole thing. I will just cover some of these pertinent sections for, the practical changes you could see. And that starts on page 27, and that's going to be paragraph 58. And then you're going to have some subparagraphs. There's going to be 13 of them that include the majority of these changes that you could see taking effect from a practical standpoint. So I'll cover a few of those here that I think are most important. The big ones are 1 through 3. I'll kind of lump those together, and that pretty much states that NAR cannot create rules that would allow seller's agent to set commission for a buyer's agent, and that all fields that on the listing would show that before will be eliminated in the MLS, and you're not going to be able to list that anywhere else in the MLS, and the rule specifically prohibits that. And then number 4 states that there's a blanket ban on requirement that agents subscribe to the MLS in order to offer and accept compensation for their work. Number 5, which kind of goes hand in hand with 1 through 3, states that realtors or brokers can't undertake any other mechanism or method for making an offer for buyer, broker, commission, or compensation. So I think it's getting at and saying you can't do it in any similar fashion. You certainly can't do it on the MLS as you would before. But there is one exception to that, which would be that your agency or brokerage could list it on their website. Whatever the offer is, you could put it on your website. There may be other caveats to that as they begin to get implemented and we really start to see these in practice. I'm sure there will be more avenues that you all can take. Jumping to number 6, which I think is another big one, that requires that all Realtor MLS participants enter into a written agreement with the buyer before even touring homes that states a couple things, including the amount of compensation that the broker or realtor would receive. The amount can't be open-ended, so it has to be definite. And the realtor or broker cannot receive any compensation that exceeds the agreed upon amount in that written agreement. So if you anticipate or negotiating any bonuses or might think you might achieve a bonus in that particular deal or transaction, you might want to try to think of that ahead of time so that way you could put that in an agreement so you don't cut yourself short at the end of the day. It is a little bit difficult to do that in practice, I know, but it kind of makes us think a little bit more here. And so be aware of that. Jump into number 8. I think this is another huge one. In the instance that the seller wanted to make a payment for another broker, which again is the whole purpose of this rule, or a representative for the buyer, and that could be such as a real estate attorney, they must have it in writing before the payment takes place. Of course, the agreement would take place within that writing, but it's recommended that they don't agree before that writing is in place. And then, of course, it has to include a specific amount. So you're going to want to have all those details before that agreement takes place or payment takes place by the seller on behalf of a representative for the buyer. And then jumping all the way down to 13, which I think is possibly the biggest one of them all, which states that this settlement and these rules, essentially these sub 13 paragraphs, state that realtors shall not be prevented from offering compensation to buyer's broker off of the MLS or the sellers from offering buyer's concessions. So it's still allowed. Essentially, the effect is it's just how you go about it, and you got to do it in a fashion that wouldn't violate these rules or wouldn't constitute what the whole reason the lawsuits were brought about, which would be anti-competitive conduct. So that's the purpose of the rules here, is to eliminate that situation that we've seen in the past. And of course, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in practice because, we all know that there's a difference between theory and practice. Once you get out there, try to implement this, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But the big thing is they could still make that offer. You just have to figure out how to do it in a fashion that doesn't constitute that type of conduct or doesn't violate these rules. And so next, I think what can we expect to see? Well, you might see that open houses might become a little bit more important or frequent, because then that might be an avenue for you to communicate that offer. And it might give you that competitive advantage if you're continuing to have more often open houses and you're making that offer during that time, whether it's a prospective buyer or an agent. You might get that edge to make that offer. Of course, the big effect is that buyers can now negotiate commission or compensation paid to its representative or realtor or broker. Of course, that eliminates the situation of anti-competitive conduct. The next thing is it's going to be interesting to see dual agency, or what might be informally referred to as double ending a deal, given the requirements for negotiations and things of that nature. Might be a little bit easier, might be a little bit harder. I think we just got to think it through in order to eliminate that conduct and not violate these rules. But that'll be another interesting aspect. You might see some changes to your local association forms that you use to facilitate the deals. So look out for that. Another thing you might see are realtors, agents, or otherwise leaving the industry. It is going to make it a little bit more difficult. And so those that might choose to plan are probably going to stay and benefit. And you might have those that are just seeking a career change based upon these changes. However, it does appear that these are temporary, which is interesting. So you'll see that in the following paragraph after these sub 13 paragraphs. So that's something to note as well as you're looking through this. And I do recommend that all, realtors and brokers and QBs read these, specifically those 13 paragraphs. Read them a few times, get familiar, and start to plan and anticipate. The last thing that might be in effect, might not, is it might have a detrimental effect to some socioeconomic classes. So if a seller doesn't agree to pay the buyer, broker, commission, or agent, buyer can't afford it. That might leave them at a disadvantage, allowing others, such as wealthier investors or even corporations or companies, to pull the deal out from under these otherwise qualified buyers that just don't have that amount of resources. And so that might be an effect as well. But there you have it. That's the NAR settlement. If you'd like to see anything else or have any other questions or like to get a deep dive on maybe one of these aspects, just put a comment down below. I'll answer it there or create another video. But what I'll leave you guys with, and what I would tell any other entrepreneur or someone that's in sales, is you have to expect these types of things to happen no matter what industry you're in. You have to learn how to pivot. And what that means is when these things come about, you have to understand them, learn them, and then start to formulate a game plan that keeps you competitive and, successful in the industry. So that way, of course, you continue to get clients, continue selling homes, continue helping clients acquire homes. And I think if you do that, you'll continue dominating in the real estate market, especially in the market today. So that would be my little tip for you all, and especially going forward. I'm sure there'll be some other changes in the real estate industry, but if you continue to do that, you're probably making a great bet on taking those actions that you'll be successful and they'll be beneficial actions. And so, as always, guys, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button down below. If you keep supporting, Julio G TV will keep growing. And you're always welcome to turn on those notifications so that way when I upload more content, you'll be notified. And with that, I appreciate you all watching. Until the next one, take care.